Hey there, and welcome to, let's see, Pro Tools 110, Exercise 1. All right, here we go, over halfway through. Well, actually, we're halfway through right now, but starting now, we're over halfway through, a few seconds into it. Okay, so Exercise 1, I/O setup workflows. So one thing I want to show you is this phrase right here. This exercise is designed to be completed using an audio interface with a minimum of 4 outputs. As a result, that means that we're not going to be able to see everything or hear everything that you can do in this exercise, because this was done on a computer that had basically some sort of surround sound system, or maybe multiple outputs for different clients. We are working on our home computers, on home laptops, on borrowed laptops from the school. We just have stereo outputs, left and right. 2 outputs. That's what we're dealing with. 2 outputs. This project says it's for a minimum of 4 outputs. However, that doesn't mean we should not do this exercise, because it's still going to take us through the input-output panel, which is an important thing to know in Pro Tools going forward, because we're going to be doing things like bouncing tracks, routing tracks from one to another. We've already done it a little bit when we've dealt with sends. So this is just diving a little deeper into this. So even though we won't be able to do this exercise to the fullest extent, it's still important to do. So let's get to it. Getting started. As a result, let's see here. To get started, we will need to create a blank session. All right, let's do it. I have a session open because there actually is a session set for exercise 1 in your exercise media folder, but it's saying to start by making a blank one. So we will do that. Okay, so 24-bit, 44.1, stereo mix, interleaved, name the session descriptively. We're going to call it Exercise 1 I/O Setup Your Name. Okay, let's do it. Okay, create. And we're going to call this Exercise 1 I/O Setup KT. I just do initials, I don't do my full name. Wave, 24-bit. 44.1. We'll have this on stereo mix. What do they say here? Yep, stereo mix. Interleaved, we want it checked. Remember why? If you don't, think about it for a second. Okay. Then hit create. What I would suggest is go ahead and put this in the Pro Tools 110 exercise folder, because that's the folder we'll be working with for the rest of the semester. So go ahead and put this in the Pro Tools 110 exercise media folder. Save. And look at this. We have a blank session. What you're seeing here is the mix window. See that? Mix. So we want to go up to window and go over to edit. Okay. Now, you might remember in class, I switched my interface to a dark user interface. I just think it looks better, and it's a little easier to see the mouse because the mouse has got a nice white outline. So it's a little easier to see that against a dark background. Okay. We've created a session with no tracks. So we're going to open up the input-output setup box, and then in the input tab, click default. So where is the input-output setup box? Well, let's look at the word setup. Setup, right there. I/O, input-output. Here we are in the input-output box. So again, this is not something you're going to have to dive into much when you're working just on a laptop or any sort of stereo speaker setup. This is something that actually will be invaluable if you're in a studio with multiple, maybe your clients are in another room and they want to hear something. You're in your room, you want to hear something. Maybe a producer comes in and they want to hear something on some headphones. This is where you can direct different mixes to different people. That's when you would use this. But if you're at home, doing Pro Tools on your laptop or your computer with your stereo speakers, this is not something you're going to be diving into too much, but it's still good to know where it is and what it does. Input. So what we want to do is hit the default. Right here you can see input. Right now there are no inputs in here. So let's hit default. As you can see, it's grayed out. So let's see what they tell us to do here. In the input tab, click the default button to set your inputs to their default values. In the output tab, click the default button to set your inputs to their default values. Choose the output path connected to your speakers as your monitor path and audition path. Okay, so let's do it. Input, output. So right now, I don't have any input going into Pro Tools right now. Why? Because think about our playback engine. Setup playback engine. My playback engine is the MacBook Pro speakers. Speakers don't have an input. An input would be something like a microphone. Speakers don't have a microphone. Speakers output audio. They don't input audio. So if I actually want to have inputs, I would need to choose something that would have inputs and outputs. For example, if you are using a Windows computer, you might have a sound card that would have inputs and outputs. If you're using our PC laptops from school, you could be using the ASIO driver that has inputs and outputs, and you would see something there. I don't. However, if I go over here to Pro FX, again, this is in the playback engine. Pro FX is an audio interface that I have. You most likely don't have it. I have it here at home. Okay, so now we're going to create a new path. Let's see what they say. One stereo path. All right, here we go. New path. Create one stereo, and we'll call it main mon. And again, like I said, this is how you create buses that actually have names that will make sense to you. And this is what a lot of people do. We've been opening up Pro Tools and just kind of using their generic default settings for everything, right? Once you start working with Pro Tools regularly, you'll have a system set up where you'll figure out, oh, you know what? I want my speakers named main speakers, and I want the speakers over there named backup speakers or client speakers, things like that. And you can actually custom name your inputs, your outputs, and your buses. And then for every session you open up after creating these new paths, those names stay the same. So you can actually make it a lot more sort of, I don't know, friendly seeming rather than just bus 1, 2, bus 3, 4. So let's see, stereo Q mix. Man, my phone is going off today. It's like late at night. What's going on? Stereo subgroup bus. And then, we wanted 5 of those. One stereo reverb bus. What I like about this new book is that he really is into the repetition. It's like, do this over and over and over again. And actually, when you do that, you kind of get it, the muscle memory sort of takes over and you actually remember how to do things the next time. Okay. So then I believe we will create it. Look at that. Now, these are our buses. Now, when we open up our session and we go to send something on a bus, these will be the selections we get. Pretty cool. Click the create button and your buses will populate. Assign the main monitor bus to the output path assigned to your stereo speakers. Okay. Assign the Q mix bus to another available stereo output path. We don't have that. Remember, we've got just one set of stereo speakers in our system. So main monitor bus and QMix bus will both be going to the same paths, same stereo output path. Oh, it said, I'm sorry, got to read ahead. If you're using an audio interface with only 2 outputs, do not assign the QMix bus to an output path at this time. Great. And then assign your default output bus to be main monitor for both mono and stereo tracks. Okay, so let's go in there and do it. Assign the main monitor bus to the output path assigned to your stereo speakers. So main monitor bus. So we are mapping it. We're mapping it to an output path. So we want to check it. And these, as we determined before, our speakers are analog 1, 2, and we can rename those as well in this panel, but we're not doing it yet. On mine, I could choose another one, but I'm not gonna choose that. It's told us to keep QMix blank if we're only dealing with one set of stereo speakers, which all of us are, so we'll take that advice. And then assign your default output bus to be main monitor for both mono and stereo tracks. So right here, default output bus, click on this. So we'll have mono, bus, I think that's it. Where's the output? There it is, output, main monitor. There it is. Sorry. Default output bus, mono, output, main monitor. Default output bus, stereo output, main monitor. It's being a little funky. Oh, here it is, output meter path. Let's see here. It's being a little funky. Let's see if they have a picture that we can look at. Assign your default output bus to be main monitor for both mono and stereo tracks. What's interesting here is it's not letting us do that. At least it's not letting me do that. See, I click on it, but it's not letting me select it, which is interesting. So we'll leave that be for now, because if you look in the picture here, if you look really closely right there, it actually says the same thing that mine says right here. So we will leave it as such. That is a little odd though, but we'll leave it like that. Click the OK button and your changes will be applied to the session. Great. Save your session before proceeding to the next part of the exercise. File, save. That's the thing. That's the thing with these exercises. Like I said, this happened with the last edition too. They usually make these sessions on machines that have deluxe setups, and we're just using machines that are, just have like stereo headphones or something. So sometimes what they ask us to do, we can't really do, or we can only do halfway because we're just using a basic system and they're not. But that's okay. We're still getting to know the I/O window. Now that you saved your settings, we're going to export them as a PIO file. Reopen the dialog box, click the Export Settings button, the browser window, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So, set up I/O. And here we have Export Settings. Click on that. And let's see here. Name your PIO file I/O settings for import. Okay. And as you can see, by default, it is saving it to a folder that's in your Pro Tools application folder called I/O settings. And the reason why Pro Tools is good at making sure that when you save something, by default, it's going to put it in a location that it's supposed to be in. And it'll only go somewhere else if you manually choose it. So if you don't click this button and switch it, it'll be in the right place. And you might say to yourself, why am I exporting this? Well, think about it. If you go to another system, and this happens a lot, you'll be working at home and then you're going to go work on another system, and everything's going to be set up for those people. Well, it wouldn't it be great if you sat down at another system and brought in your I/O settings export and imported it into their system. And then when you open it up, all your bus names are there, all your input and output settings are how you want them to be. This is a way to basically make something that you could put on a little thumb drive, take it anywhere to any Pro Tools station, pop it in, import it, and then everything looks how it does on your home system. So that's basically what we're doing here. So name it this, and then click the save button. Did it. Okay. Close the dialog box and close the session. Okay. Oh, I know what we're doing now. Close the session. Sure. Okay. So now we're going to import, or now we're going to open up exercise 1, the pre-made session. So in the browser, so File, choose Open Session. So Pro Tools is still open. File, Open Session. So now what we need to do is, go into our Pro Tools 110 folder and open up, let's see here, Exercise 1 Q Mix. Now, we talked about this in class. What's funny is in the book, they're calling Exercise 1 Piano Solo, but it's actually Exercise 1 Q Mix. So you're reading this and you're like, what? There's only one Exercise 1 folder in here besides the one that we made. We're not opening up the one that we just made. That doesn't make any sense because we're importing input-output settings into a different session. And that session is called Exercise 1 Q Mix. They're calling it Piano Solo, but it's actually called Q Mix. So open up that one. Okay, here we go. Let's play it, see what this sounds like. Actually, here, I need to change my playback engine so you guys can hear it. Actually, no. I'll skip that for now. Let's stick with the plan. Okay. Okay, you'll notice that none of the tracks have been assigned to outputs. Okay, let us go to our... Okay, look at this. This is our mix window. Our mix window, I/O, 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 I/O. So no input, and then we've got 3 inputs. Then we have these 2 inputs that are grayed out, and then the 4th input is no input. And then our outputs are main monitor. So what we want to do is open up the I/O setup dialog box and show, let's see here, show the bus tab. Okay. Input output. We're on the bus tab right now. Okay. So we're going to import settings. Let's make sure that we're doing this right. Navigate to the I/O settings for import PIO that you created earlier. Click the open button. You'll be asked if you want to delete unused buses. Click yes. Okay. Open. Oh, there we go. Delete unused buses. Yes. So what happened there, I don't know if you saw, it was really quick. It actually added a new bus. Let's do something real quick, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. I'm going to delete all of these buses, and feel free to follow along here. I'm in the input-output window. I'm in the bus tab. I have clicked on the top bus, shift-clicked it on the bottom bus, so they're all selected. Delete path. That's okay. That's okay. I just want to show you something. First of all, you shouldn't do that. Second of all, import settings, I/O settings for import, open, boom. Look, they all come back. Now, that warning message, like I said, was just it let us know that there were buses in this session already, and by deleting them, I basically got rid of ones that were that already had something. Like the buses were going places, and I went and just like obliterated them. So now those buses don't exist anymore. So I basically screwed up the session. But what I wanted to show you is if you have an I/O setup that's blank or has buses that, in this case, buses that you don't recognize, you can import your setup, and it will apply to that session. But because someone already made buses that had stuff going on, I should have kept the ones that were already there. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to revert to saved. And that will sort of restore the buses that were there. Now let's go back to do what, let's go back and follow directions in this exercise. Here we go. Okay. Setup. I/O. Here we go. Import settings. First of all, import settings. Look at the settings right here. We're going to import these. Open. Delete unused buses. Go ahead and say yes. And what you'll see is this will change a little bit. It just added, it looks like it added main monitor and I think QMix. Yeah, it added main monitor and QMix, which were things that I made and have now imported into this session. Click the OK button. Assign the output of all tracks to the main monitor output bus. You can quickly assign the output to all tracks by holding the Option key and changing the output of any track. Okay, so to the main monitor output of all tracks. Let's see what it says here. Assign the output of all tracks. Oh, I see. Yeah. So hit OK. Now assign the output of all tracks to main monitor. That is already happening here. However, what they're talking about is if you hold down Option or Alt on Windows, here I am in the monitor tab, click and hold and choose something. So here, let's just choose QMix just for fun. Watch what happens. All of them switch to QMix. So if you want to change their input or output for everything, for all the tracks in the session, you don't have to go click, 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 click. You just have to click on one, but Option click or Alt click. Select the input or output that you want, and then it does it for all of them. Okay, so what we'll do now is File, Save As, initials, as usual. And then it looks like we're doing one more thing. Let's see. From the File menu, choose Open Session. Let's see. To finish this exercise, one more simulation. From the File menu, choose Open Session. In the browser window that appears, navigate to Exercise 1, QMix. Okay, so it looks like we are just going to close this session and open up the original one. QMix. So we opened up QMix and then we saved it as after we made some changes to it. Now they're asking us to go and open up QMix, the original one, before we saved it as our initials. So that's what we're doing now. Okay. So I think what happened was they were supposed to have a piano session and there wasn't one. So what are you going to do? You still get the idea though. In the mix window, you'll see the same tracks that you used before assigned to the main monitor output bus. You'll also see sends above each track assigned to the Q mix bus. So these are sends right here. See where it says sends? But we have the send fader. It's basically like a miniature version of the fader right here up there. So we can have, you can actually have, instead of having, you know, like when you click on a send, right? This whole thing pops up, which is cool. But you can just have a miniature version of it right there if you want to save some real estate. So that's basically what this is. This is a miniature version of this send fader. See, when I move this fader, this one moves as well. Okay. So this is what we're talking about. You'll see some sends above each track assigned to the Q mix output bus. This send is what we use to create a separate mix for our performer. This is very common. So the main monitor output is what we, the sound recordists, the Pro Tools operators, will be listening to. But the people, if we're working with a musician, they're going to be like in a booth or something. They need to listen to something on their headphones. That's what this is. So I could send them this track. I could send them this track. I could send them this track. But maybe I don't want to send them this track. That is, but as you can see, main monitor, these are my outputs, but this is the other person's outputs. So this is my mix. This is the other person's mix. This is what we're talking about, and this is what you do in the input-output panel. You set up outputs, and you can point them in different directions. So if you've got a system that has multiple types of outputs, you could send this mix to you, this mix to somebody else. I could create other sends that go to other people that have a different mix. That's basically what the input outputs do. Well, they do other things too, but that's what they're demonstrating here. Okay. Let's see here. In the bus tab, deactivate the main monitor path. So open up the input-output dialog box. Here, let's just make this a little smaller so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. Okay. In the bus tab, deactivate the main monitor path. Here's main monitor. I'm going to deactivate it. I'm going to click on this. Boom. See that? It italicizes to let me know that it's there, but it's deactivated. Got it. Right-click on Mapping to Output pop-up menu for the Q mix bus and choose the path that is mapped. Okay, here we go. If you, we'll just go to the blue thing here. If you're completing this exercise on a system with only 2 outputs, simply map the Q mix bus to the path that is mapped to your monitor speakers. Okay, so let's look at that. So for on the Q mix one, we want to map the Q mix bus to the path that is mapped to our monitor speakers. So here, these are our monitor speakers. How do I know? Because that is the little speaker icon. So we'll make Q mix. I clicked on the little arrow right here, and I'll have this one go to the speakers. There we go. So now Q mix, the Q mix bus, will be going to my speakers. And the main monitor, while it's still going to my speakers, I've turned it off. So I basically deactivated it. So now we hit OK. And look at this. Main monitor output is now grayed out. And Q mix, which was grayed out, is no longer grayed out. I have basically gone into the inputs and outputs and said, okay, I want Q mix to go to the speakers, and I just want to turn the main monitors off. If I turn them back on, look, hit OK and watch. They turn back on. But that's not what we want to do here. We want to do what the book says. Now when you play your session, you won't hear anything because the send levels are all down. As your session plays, you can change the level of the individual sends and create a different mix from the one that your control room will hear. So if I play this, you see these faders are down? But then, as they go up, here I need to make it so you guys can actually hear what I'm doing here. You don't have to do this. Just have to make it so you guys can hear what I'm doing. Okay, so now see that? So even though I'm playing it, I turned off the main monitor mix. So it's not, so these faders aren't outputting to the main monitor, but I went in and I told the Q mix to go to my speakers instead. So now I can control the mix from up here. Again, this is a separate mix for somebody else. So I can be listening to a mix if I turn these on again. And someone in the other room can be listening to this mix. This is very much like when you go to a concert and you see people on stage saying, can I get more vocals in the mix, or can I get more guitars in the mix? The person at the soundboard is controlling the sound coming out of the speakers for the audience, but they're also controlling the sounds on the speakers on the stage so the performers can hear it. This is a similar thing. This would be like the audience speakers. This would be the speakers for the people on the stage. And usually those mixes are different because the people on stage need to hear things a little bit louder, certain aspects a little louder than what the audience needs to hear. Okay, so that's it. So this is what I'd like you guys to do. To complete this exercise and turn it in, I want you to have your input-output window open so I could see that you turned main monitor off and Q mix was on. And I want to see your mix window. It should look like this with the faders up. Take a picture of this and send that in, and that will be your exercise 1 assignment.